All right. Well, welcome to another installment of Worldwide Regression Week 2020, Unleash Your Mind. And today I'm catching up with a wonderful longtime friend and fellow practitioner, Mary Truitt. Mary, gosh, we've been texting for a while. We haven't spoken face to face in, well, far too long. I'm so happy that you're here with us today. How would you like to be introduced for the show here today?
Oh, that's a funny question. God, we go so far back, Candace.
Yeah, we do. What year was that you walked into that hotel ballroom to take Dolores's class?
I don't even remember. I could look on one of my plaques up here.
It was 2012, maybe even something like
I
that.
think it was 2011,
Okay.
actually, maybe.
Yeah.
But I consider myself a QHHT practitioner for sure. I consider myself an energy worker, a quantum healer. I've done all sorts of things. And nothing means more to me than the class I took the classes I took with Dolores. And also, I'm not sure very many people know this now because the system has changed so much, but originally Dolores only picked 8 practitioners as personally recommended by her. And I got in just at the last minute. So I did get to be number 8, which was very thrilling for me. So for me, I now consider myself a QHHT person, but kind of without I think of myself as a Ronin, more of a samurai without a leader. I mean, Dolores is still my leader on the other side.
Sure.
But, and I'm taking the BQH live class in July, which I'm very excited about because Dolores always told us, make it your own, go out there and make it your own, make it your own, make it your own. And I've been doing that now for many, many years. So I don't know how to introduce me. I
think you did a great job. I have the vision of talking with you in my mind more than anything, a particular scene you and I had, because of course I didn't know about your connection to your mother, until you walked up and told me about it. And Mary's mother is a quite well-known artist. And anyway, you were talking, and what you said to me, and of course Dolores is alive at the time.
Right.
She's right over there. But somehow you and I got into this conversation and you looked me right in the eye, and I'll never forget it because you already knew who I was. You already knew who I was. And you said, if you ever want to talk about archiving Dolores's work and teachings and all that, I've got some experience with that. And it was like, this woman just stepped right into my brain here because, this of course is 3 years before Dolores's passing, but I'm already sensing it. I'm already doing some things behind the scene. I was trying to take professional photos of her, and she resisted that one all the way up to the end. And so you were spot on, and we've been friends ever since.
Yeah, I remember that so well. Yeah. So well, yeah.
Yeah. So we're both moving on, doing quantum healing in our own ways. Because, who needs a leader? Right now we're being our own leaders, right? I mean, we're doing our own thing. We're trusting our own self. And you were going to tell us about some sessions today. So why don't you?
Yeah. So, I don't want to necessarily frame our whole conversation around kind of what's going on in the world now with the virus and the seclusion that we all seem to be in. But I was thinking about what to talk about today, and 2 regressions that I did really popped into my head. So the first one I want to talk about is a really beautiful, beautiful woman, very pure soul, who came to see me for a regression. And she was in the very last stages of a very serious cancer all over her body. And she didn't really come for a healing so much as she did just to process her own future or death or whatever might happen. So we had a great session. And one of her questions was, I've always wanted to be a healer. And instead I was in IT my whole life. And did I get cancer because I didn't do my dream, or I didn't do, what I was supposed to do? Am I full of anger? Am I whatever? And this woman had pursued everything. She changed her diet. She was exercising perfectly. She had gone down every possible healing road you could go down to get better. And when we got to her higher self, talking to her subconscious, the subconscious said, don't worry. there are two kinds of healers in this world. The first kind is the kind who deliberately puts themselves in the way of helping people. They become nurses and doctors and physician's assistants and Reiki masters and energy workers and, you know, whatever else you want to say, teachers, anybody who does healing work. They deliberately try to heal people. And they said, but the more valuable and even higher level of healers are the people who get sick.
Wow.
Because the people who get sick are the ones who heal everybody around them. And they said, you know, your illness has caused so many people's hearts to open and so many people to go down that road with you, studying vitamins, studying nutrition, studying, you know, whatever. So they said, you know, you think you're not a healer, but you actually are a healer, which I thought was so wonderful. So I'm thinking now of the stories that are coming out of, you know, hospitals and people who are getting sick and the families who care for them. And especially I'm thinking about the nurses and the doctors. And so I think everybody, you know, has this opportunity now to see their role as so vital and so important, whether they're the person who gets sick or the person who is helping people who get sick.
Boy, you know, so many things come to mind as you talk about that, including the fact that look at how many people, even quantum healers in our own community, who got to what they're doing because they too were sick and then maybe went through something, and some still are, right? Which is a very interesting thing because, you know, years ago, I guess people would consider that a disconnect. You know, how is it that you can help or be a healer or consider yourself a healer or help me to heal if you yourself are not well? But that was back in the days when we were very much, you know, into the this or that. But we're in different days now. We're in the this and that days. And speaking of, it's Palm Sunday that we are doing this recording, and this recording will be then aired in the middle of April, and the world just may change in a number of ways.
Who knows?
Before then, because it's crazy out there, isn't it?
It is. And, you know, when you were talking about the two different kinds of healer idea and people who are sick, you and I have talked before about the wounded healer archetype.
Yeah. And
of course, I can't help but think that so many new healers will be born from this illness. So people who have any time you experience an illness, of course, it's the greatest teacher we can have practically if you survive. So I can't help but think that there'll be such a new way of seeing the whole medical field. You know, the heroes are emerging as the nurses and the people on the ground and nutrition and whatever else can support this. So yeah, I don't know what's coming, but I think, you know, I got a message from one of my guides, which was, and it's easy for me to say because knock on wood, nobody in my direct family is ill right now, but I got a message from one of my guides, which was this virus is going to heal more people than it hurts.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
And I do think that that is hopefully true because it's such a time of you know, everybody going inwards and hunkering down with their families or into themselves. And it's sort of become a cliche now to say this, but we all are being given an opportunity right now to enter into who we really are and all the closed doors that we've had in our lives that we can now open because some of us need to be at home secluded. Yes. So
it's, you know, I love your session. There's two kinds of healers, but as you're even talking, I'm thinking of, gosh, there's so many different kinds of healers. You know, one of the things that I say all the time, and even now, is about laughing and how important a sense of humor is. And even especially now, even in these serious times, my goodness, do we need a sense of humor? And if you can make somebody smile or laugh, that is incredibly healing right now. So even if you are that person,
comedian,
yeah, if you could find a little bit of humor somewhere, and I mean, and look at some of the memes that are out there. I mean, they can just crack you up. And then some people maybe feel guilty a little bit of that, but know that that is a release. I mean, not only are you releasing some, you know, the stress and some of the uncertainty from your own body, but you're helping the collective when you do that. So just giving somebody a smile or a hello or making them laugh about something.
You know, as you're saying that, the person who pops into my head instantly is Robin Williams.
Yeah.
And I'd never really thought about this before, but I think there must be a wounded comedian archetype as well.
Yeah.
Because I think that kind of, you know, the comedians who go on stage, make you laugh, the clown, you know, and then goes off stage and is miserable, you know. So I do think that that's a very high calling, being the person who makes people laugh.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other lifetime I was going to talk about was a lifetime that talked about fear. And I think that obviously a lot of us go into fear off and on. My own scale is like, well, I'm not afraid, then I'm terrified. I'm not afraid, then I kind of teeter back and forth between the two and try to keep a balance. But I always remember this session. A young woman came to see me in her late 20s. And the first life they showed us was a little boy in a frozen landscape covered in furs. And, you know, it was clearly a frozen period of time, either winter or it was always frozen where he lived. Anyway, he was about 4 or 5 years old, and he was trying to be a big boy, and he walked away from his village, and he wanted to go hunting or something to find an animal. And as soon as he got away from his village, he got lost. And he was looking around for a cave that he knew was nearby, and he basically lay down in the snow and died. And we saw that lifetime, which was terrible. She was very upset about it. And he was so little and trying so hard to be brave. And then the other lifetime they showed us right after that, that was a part of that one, was a young man somewhere in probably northern Africa, we figured it out, who was riding an animal of some kind across a big landscape with trees in it and stuff. And he stopped his animal, she couldn't tell what it was, climbed up into the tree with a gigantic spear and waited for animals to come under the tree that were terrifying animals. And he threw the spear, and he was this outrageous, you know, full of confidence, young man with a huge energy. He killed the animal, and he took the beast home and fed his village or whatever. And so we get to the higher self, and the higher self said, I just wanted to show her what happens when you go into fear, because that little boy was only about 10 feet away from his cave. And if he had made it to the cave, he would have been fine. But the first thing that disappears when you go into fear is your brain doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
And so then they showed us the sort of teenage boy full of confidence, and, you know, he should never have been able to really kill that animal, but he had so much confidence and had no fear whatsoever. And so he was successful. And so I was thinking a lot about how I encounter every day so much fear right now. And I feel as if our whole globe in a way is in lockdown in fear. And the problem is that makes people unable to think clearly. And so people are behaving in ridiculous ways. And so if we could just try to not get into that fear, then at least our brains have some chance of still working just a little bit.
Yeah, boy. And it's difficult though, because, you know, we're a partnership. I always say, you know, we have this physical being, but this is almost kind of like your pet. This is this biological thing that is programmed to have reactions of all kinds. You know, if I were to take my hands and go and clap in front of your face, you would probably blink. That's because it's biologically built into us. Just like if you would turn a corner and there'd be a lion there, you know, when people say I'm not afraid of anything, I'm like, really? You know, really? I mean, you have to acknowledge that we're biological creatures, and this is part of our makeup. You know, we may be able to know that we have a spiritual component to us. And this is when we're really relying on some of that knowledge of knowing that we are eternal beings and that we're always, you know, we're infinitely alive in some manner, even if we aren't in partnership with this body. But this is the time for people like us, light workers, healers, comedians, caregivers of the world, to step up on stage. And suddenly all of those people who were so worshiped and put on pedestals, where the heck are they? you know, the sports heroes, the movie stars and such. They're what, you know, the real heroes, the real the people that bring meaning to this human life are suddenly getting to work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people who work in grocery stores and carry the mail and are, you know, work in hospitals.
Yeah.
But I was also going to say, one of the things about the fear is that it's forcing us to rely on our own judgment, because if you want to be afraid, you can participate in that. I always think of Eckhart Tolle talking about the pain body and how the pain body wants more pain. And so the idea of indulging in that, when you feel yourself going into that place of, I'm afraid, and then we all look on the internet or we look for places to mirror that back to us. Oh yeah, well, you're right to be afraid. And so if we can just take a little tiny pause, you know, I'm doing this thing now before I get on my phone where, you know, when I'm in fear, I open my phone and I immediately go to a place, or my computer, of where I might be able to find more stuff to make me more afraid. Sometimes I can get into that place. But what I'm doing now is, before I open any electronics, I pause and feel a kind of a weight inside me of, I'm not getting off my lily pad. You know, I'm going to be happy sitting in the sun on my lily pad. And no matter what I see, I'm not going to throw my energy there. I'm going to let it reflect to me, but I'm going to stay in this place. And so I think that fear, we don't really know who the monster is right now. We don't know who the enemy is.
Yeah.
And so is it the virus? Is it the hospitals that don't have enough stuff? Is it the fact that I smiled at somebody and got too close to them in the store? Is it, we don't know who the enemy is. And so we're in a kind of a Kafkaesque situation of just complete and total not knowing what's happening, really.
I've been thinking about that so much, you know, because my mother, who was a heroine in her own young life during the Second World War, and then my father, who you know, been to Vietnam and had his moments, and I knew even growing up that I had it so much different, right? I didn't have to go through the food rationing that my mother did. I didn't have to be afraid that somebody was shooting a missile at me like my father did, or heaven forbid, like when he was shot down and was on the ground and the enemy was headed towards him. I mean, those, you know, these stories that have come up in my life, and I've, you know, been very aware how removed from that I am. But even this morning, I was thinking about exactly that. I was thinking, and, you know, we know there are a lot of levels and layers to wars and conflicts. We may know way more about that now than we ever have. However, we still, what was directly in front of us, we could kind of name and see, right? We could, at least we could, you know, kind of see what direction that was all coming from. Well, we're in some sort of conflict, war, and situation right now where you're exactly right. We don't know what's going on.
And we don't know who the enemy is. So
exactly,
you know, we might have all the energy in the world to fight. Like, yeah. I know I'm strong. I can fight this enemy. Yeah. But wait, what is it? Where do I go? What do I do?
Right.
So
yeah,
it forces us into some kind of behavior that is beyond what is the enemy, and more, who am I?
Yeah. Yeah. And this is where discernment and feeling in your gut right now is just so huge. You may be very aware of some of the talk out there about mandated vaccinations,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and I've been wary of that for a very long time. And even this morning when I was out walking the fields, headed toward my barn and the horses, I relived a small memory of when I was a first-time mother. And I brought my then, 2-month-old for her first inoculations. And my mother-in-law happened to be visiting at the time, and she went with me to the hospital. And I was an absolute, I wouldn't call it hysterical, but I was this emotional mess about this idea that those needles were going to go into my baby's body. And I was having the mental conversation with myself, because I still, I mean, this was 1990, so I wasn't where I am now, which was, who I am is way more important than what some program is telling me. In 1990, I'm like, I'm still listening to that program. Well, I'm not listening to that program anymore. And I think many of us out there are not listening to that program anymore. And when we're talking about be authentic and be who yourself and be who you are right here. So I actually had like a conversation, and you know how this works. I had a conversation with that young mother, that me. I actually had a dialogue, and this is sort of what we do in session work, right? And I had a dialogue. I'm getting goosebumps as I'm thinking about it. And I'm patting that younger me on the shoulder and forgiving her, of course, too, because she's now through a part of me feels guilty that I did that. You know, where was that part of me that I went, yeah, not my kid. Not today, maybe not ever. That wasn't me at the time, but I had to go through things to get there, right? But I don't know, you know, some of our greatest heroes ever were, they're American. Give me liberty or give me death. I've been thinking a lot about that line. You know, who, you know, when somebody's at your door asking for papers or things, you know, I mean, what are you going to do? What are we all going to do? I don't know. You can say one thing, and then when you're faced with it, what's really going to happen? I don't know that many of us know, and maybe it'll turn out better than any of us can imagine. And that's the way I just kind of have to keep thinking about that part.
That's the hard work of it, right? Is that each of us said, like, for you, it might be mandatory vaccinations terrify you. For me, somebody who's never gotten a flu shot, I might think, well, actually, I'll take a corona shot. Like, give me that, you know, like who knows where we're each going to go. I'm terrified of the person coming to the door and saying, show me your papers. But each of us will become who we are and behave characteristically, right? Yeah. Our fears and what we love will become more and more prominent. It's so funny because about a month before this whole thing started, I went to Amsterdam to visit my daughter who was doing a year abroad there, or a semester abroad. And before I went, the corona was just kind of a little whisper in the air. And I asked my son's best friend, who's an infectious disease doctor in New York, you know, should my mom go to Amsterdam or will she get quarantined or whatever? And he said, nah, go ahead. She'll be fine. It's not starting yet. And so I went, and I had a terrible cold while I was there, and it was raining, and, you know, Amsterdam in February, you know, so freezing cold. And I was so sick. I didn't have a fever, but I was, you know, my chest hurt, my blah, blah, blah. So for all I know, I've already had the damn thing. But anyway, when I came back, I wasn't getting well as fast as I wanted to because my chest was still bothering me a little bit. And I don't like to be sick. I don't forgive my guides. I don't forgive anybody for not helping me get better immediately. I'm not a good patient. So I started talking to my guides about it. And the first message I got was, this illness knows exactly what it's doing. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe it's strengthening my immune system. Maybe it's, you know, something. And then the next message was very odd. And it said, live moments, not months. And I was like, live moments, not months.
I just saw that on a t-shirt.
Yeah, I know. I was like, I'm pretty good at staying present. I don't know why you're talking about that. And then I realized when the corona really did hit everybody, that message, in a way, may have been for now. This illness knows exactly what it's doing. Live moments, not months. And so I have not asked about the virus. I have not gone into any kind of deep session work or talked to my guides about it because I feel as if they already gave me the message that I was supposed to get about that.
You know, I've been thinking, and again, today's the 5th of April, and we just went through the 444 yesterday, and my dreams all this year, but you know, in the latter part of March and the first few days of April, they've all been very symbolically, you know, about the collective, and suddenly, and I counted, and I mentioned this to you before we pressed record on the show today. I've just had my 4th night of no dreaming whatsoever, which is very unnerving for me. I like knowing what I do at night. I typically do. I don't ever have bad dreams. Once in a blue moon, something disturbing flits across the way, but not typically, and certainly not nightmares, and not at all. And I was thinking of that this morning too as I was walking. And you and I have talked about this too in our quantum healing session work. And Dolores was this way too. I just don't run across like the really terrifying negative entity kind of releasement things, you know, where people get really bogged down in a lot of that stuff, discarnates and negative agendas and all of that kind of stuff. I just, and at first I just waited. I figured, you know, time would just present that to me after all of these years in full-time session work. And then I really kind of began to look at it a different way. And I realized, and I then explored it a little more fully with Dolores in session work and in my meditations and dreams, I didn't sign up for that. I signed up for something different. I signed up for a glass half full kind of almost everything. So whereas in my session work, I don't run across that ever. I never say never. So far, I haven't, but I haven't. It's also the same way with my dream world, and it's just not available. And so I had this very small flash. I think I posted about it on Facebook. I just had one little flash. I think it was like the April Thursday night or whatever. I saw one thing. And I had Dolores start to talk to me. And I started to tell you this before too, but I'm going to write this down. But I was taking a bath and I was thinking about that flash. And I'm like, you know, what's going on, Dolores? And I heard Dolores say, Bassomatic. And I was like, what? And I'm like, I heard Dolores in my head, Bassomatic. I'm like, the only thing I know about Bassomatic's an old SNL skit with Saturday Night Live skit with Dan Aykroyd. And he's got like, Ronco's Bassomatic, and he, you know, holds the blender there, and he gets the fish and he puts it in there with water, and this, of course, a live audience, and he presses blend, and like it goes into this massive, disgusting, whirling mess of gross, and he pours it into a glass, and the whole audience, the whole audience is going, ah! In my dream, what I actually was seeing was pieces of reality being put in a blender, and I am backing away from it going, okay, that may be going on. Not going to drink that right now. I'm going to go focus on something else. So I'm also being kind to myself about that as well. I'm really, really looking forward to my dreams returning though, because maybe that'll give more of a clue about how this is all gonna play out. Are you feeling generally hopeful though, Mary?
Yeah, oh, absolutely I am. And I just wanted to go backwards for one sec to what you said about how you don't get the entity clients and the dark agenda clients and the this and that. So I think one of the gifts of doing the work that we do, where we regress people to look at their future lives or past lives or parallel lives, whatever, is that I honestly think I can say that every single client who has ever come to me has given me more than I've given them. And I think that we attract the clients that we need for our own learning. And that may not be a learning that you need. Do you know what I'm saying? So I think that's not something you need. That's not something, you understand that. You understand the bad guys and the entities and the this and that. And so, you know, when a person leaves here after a session, I really pause and I mostly think about, of course, for them, how can I support them moving forward? But I also then, after it begins to settle down, say, how was this for me also? And so I think that's one of the gifts of doing this work, is that the universe is so finely tuned that we get what we need each session as well.
Yes. And you know, after doing this work for so many years, that's why I built that component right into BQH, because it just cannot be about a rigid, mechanical, procedural check every box kind of thing. It cannot be, because I have completely different clients than this person, than this person, than this person. And you have to, it's an energetic thing. It's a vibrational thing. It's an energy match that is happening where, yes, there's this dance and there's this thing back and forth, and it doesn't always fit into a box. It doesn't always play out that way. I'm thinking about Dolores. I've told this story a number of times, but I remember standing around. It was right before a dinner. We were standing around and getting ready to sit down, and there was this guy, and I remember he was a really big guy. I don't remember who it was at all, but he was like, like 6'4", a really big guy. And he's standing right next to Dolores, and he's got this big booming voice, and everybody's talking. It was one, after one of the conferences, one of the evenings, and he was like, I've been trying to get a session with you, Dolores. And this guy thought, I think, quite a bit of himself, and Dolores is like, yeah, you and everyone else, get on my years-long list.
You and my 14-year waiting list.
Right? Yeah. Right, Anyway, and he was like, and I'll never forget this small exchange, though, because, Dolores often, she kept some cards pretty close to her chest. That woman did. I got some great moments where I got to see parts of Dolores she didn't put up on the stage. And he actually, so he starts talking about, I think, some dreams and some other things. And he's like, and I've had this awful thing and this thing happened. And then he's basically looking right at Dolores, and he says, I think I might really have a reptilian embedded in me or something. I mean, and he says that to her in kind of a dual way, as he's entertaining a crowd of people talking, and he's also really wanting her to know this and to provide some sort of whatever, and maybe even to say, I could sense it in him. Well, you come on over and I'll do a session for you tonight or whatever.
It'll be free. I can't wait. Yeah, right.
You're so right. So I'm watching this whole thing, and she looks at him, and she says something like, oh my gosh, I wish I would have committed it to memory. But she says something along the lines of, well, now I'm for sure not going to do a session with you. I mean, which is so Dolores, right? So it doesn't play into her contract. It doesn't play into her belief system. It's not anything she wants to look at, which is why she did what she did about some of the stuff. Is she's like, we don't talk about this in my community. She was afraid that the fear would be contagious and get out of control. Now in our community as it stands now, I take a completely different tack, because I say, if you try to absolutely censor that 100%, it creates its own big monster of fear over here. So in the quantumhealers.com community right now, you want to talk about that stuff? Fine. Just you don't apply that to everybody. Just because you're having this experience does not mean everybody can, will, does, that it's part of the reality. I really think of, the Vesica Pisces, some realities intersect and others don't. So I'll never forget that. And so I know that Dolores's reality just didn't focus on that. Neither does mine.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting, because I'm thinking, for some reason, that immediately threw me into Twitter, which is, it's very interesting right now. I think I mentioned earlier, my son's best friend is an infectious disease doctor in New York City. And he uses Twitter every day to say, I'm trying this and I'm trying that and I'm trying this. What are you doctors seeing? Have you guys tried this? And so there's this open dialogue on, how the hell are we going to treat this virus? I've got like 2 minutes with each patient. What am I going to do? And which medicines work for you? What doses? And the doctors are all having this open forum of actually consulting with each other across the globe on how to treat these patients. And the idea of closing that dialogue off, or saying, we have this one way of doing things and we're not going to change it, right? Is we started by using this and we're not going to change now just because we see evidence of something else. And the idea of this expansion, this incredible expansion and global connection that's going on, to me is one of the, God, I don't want to say it because I know people have family members who are dying of this or who have died, but I really hope to see the beauty that comes from this instead of the horror. And this kind of goes into the the meditation that I was given in my meditation. I was given 2 meditations, and I would love to say what they are very briefly.
Sure.
One was that, you know, as a child, I was often told, I went to an international school in Tokyo, and often my classmates and I didn't speak the same language. We mostly all spoke Japanese, but not everybody spoke English, and some people spoke Korean or whatever. And the teacher would always say, the smile is the universal language. And I was always just like, oh yeah, you know, like smile, universal language. But in my meditation, what I heard was the smile is not the universal language. The universal language is breath. And breath is what we all share. In some societies, I actually read a book a couple months ago, Malcolm Gladwell's new book, in which the smile in some societies is a sign of anger.
Yeah.
And so what I got was the breath is the universal language. And it's one thing we can all understand. If a baby, you know, somewhere on the shores of, you know, Indonesia can't breathe, it's the same breath that the baby sitting in my lap can't breathe, right? So this idea of the breath and then of the earth. And what I was shown was that a very, very powerful healing meditation for us, for the people who may be sick, and also for Gaia itself, is to visualize, begin with the self and become, you know, go deep into the belly breath. We all know how to, you know, do that during meditation, and then expand it to the space that we're in, breathing, and feel the rhythm of the breath of the whole planet. I don't know if you all have seen that video where they show what it looks like as in a time-lapse photography of the earth, and it looks as if the earth is breathing. Have you seen that, Candace?
No, but I want to now.
It's incredible. And it looks as if everything, the shore coming up and going back, everything is a breath.
Yeah.
And so you can expand it from yourself to your house, to the people here, to your neighborhood, to your state, and then eventually have an image in your mind of the globe and it breathing healthily, and every member of the planet breathing in a healthy way in and out. And so I think it's the breath in a way that's been attacked. And so if we can become part of the universal breath going in and out, I think that's a wonderful thing to do in meditation. And then the second thing that came to me in my meditation was, I have a friend, actually I do have a friend who's had COVID, but luckily she's recovering now. And so I never really worried about her because she had a great homeopathic doctor and it didn't get deep into her lungs. But I had to send her healing. And what came to me was the COVID virus looks like the globe kind of, right? It's a circle, it's a round thing. And it has those funny spikes all over it. And so when I was visualizing her, I was visualizing that, yes, she did indeed have those things in her body, but all the little spikes fell off. Wow. And so the meditation is to visualize this virus on the planet, but it's the spikes that make it attach to the mucosal system and to the wherever it attaches with those little spikes. And so Adam Dream Healer teaches this in his healing, which is you have to really get down into what the actual mechanism of the illness or disease or virus looks like, and then diffuse it. So you can use fire, you can use whatever you want to diffuse it. But I visualize the little spikes just drooping down and falling off because the balls can just leave harmlessly.
That is so beautiful. You know, I couldn't help but think about the whole idea of existence itself, right? The in and out breath of God, right?
Yeah.
You know, the exhaling is considered the massive explosion of the universe, etc., the Big Bang, and then the inhale. That's how I've always thought about, the Mayan calendar and everything, which, they say it happened around 2012, but we're still kind of in that time where we're pulling back in. And isn't that interesting that it's the breath that is?
I do think it's so interesting because you can't quantify. You can't say, oh, people over here, this is happening to their, whatever. It's just the breath is something everybody has. We all share it in common. And those were the two kind of meditations that came up for me. And we can also, of course, send that breath and that healing into the center of the earth, which is a very important, I think right now, very, very important, the idea of the internal sun, the internal, eternal sort of crystalline grid inside the earth. And so if we can connect the breath to that as well, very, very important. Yeah.
You know, I always think about it. We always talk about them as they're some sort of cohesive group, the Tibetan monks who sit over there, and we refer to them all the time. But, you know, there is this idea though, too, that they, you know, they do a lot of meditation. They do a lot of this breath work stuff. They quiet their mind. They remove themselves from the news of the world. And it's been known for a long time that a human who can attain that kind of balance and peace and inner strength and understanding, these are the ones who are less affected by almost anything. I mean, there's this thing that's said all over the place. They can even like drink poison. They can drink cyanide and it won't bother them because they're like, this won't bother me, and they really, really believe it. But those of us who subject ourselves to the fear program, well, that's kind of harder to do for us. But it's bringing us to some of that, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I can't, in some ways it seems almost ridiculous that people are saying, oh, you think you have COVID, stay at home and take care of yourself. It's like, you know, you're supposed to go to the doctor, you're supposed to do this. So people are really falling back on their own resources. And if one of your resources is not being afraid, you know, I do think this sort of brings us full circle back to the beginning of not being afraid. I think, you know, having that faith really, if nothing else, it may not heal you, but it will certainly get you through a bad time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, people have gone through, humans have gone through, look at the heroes in the Holocaust or during the American Revolution, the people that, you know, I'm thinking a lot about them now, a lot. Right? Because those are the stories like you've been talking about. Those are the stories that are being created right now, some of which we won't even hear in this lifetime. That will be for our children and our grandchildren to tell. But though, you know, there are always those people, and we can imagine those people. We can imagine parts of that being within our own human spirit.
Yeah, I mean, I really would like to believe the phrase that I heard, which is, this virus is going to heal more people than it hurts. I really, really hope that. And I wanted to also share something, which was from a session almost a year ago, I think. A gentleman came to see me from New Jersey, and he, in this middle of his session, in the middle of the lifetime that he was in, he all of a sudden said, "Why, Yogananda just walked into this scene." It was a complete non sequitur. And I said, "Oh, Yogananda, I love Yogananda. He's my favorite. You know, I just love him." And he said, "Well, he's here, and he's not here for me. He's here for you."
You got a picture of him behind you, don't you?
I do. I just adore him. Here he is, my lovely Yogananda. Can you see him?
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, I can't wait to hear what happened when Yogananda came into the scene.
Yeah, and this guy really wasn't that familiar with Yogananda. So he said he was the perfect kind of channeler or transcriber. And luckily, of course, the session was recorded. So I thought I might read what
please
Yogananda said, because this message was directly for me. And when I heard it the first time, I was like, huh? Because it was basically about not being in fear and leading others to not be in fear. And I was like, well, I don't think I'm that afraid. Like, what's going on? And, you know, we've all heard this for years, right? Light workers and healers, like, you know, you don't be afraid, don't do this. You were meant for these times. You know, that famous line from, I think it's Clarissa Pinkola Estes, you know, you were meant for these times, you've got this. But I think we were all just kind of dipping a toe in the water. Now we're actually like fighting for our lives. And so if our job is not to go into fear, now it's like when they called your number, you got to stand up, right? This is what's going on. So let me read this thing. I have to take off my glasses. The message is this: prepare to be of service. Prepare to lead your brothers and sisters from fear. There will be much misunderstanding of difficulties ahead, and many people will be brought into the trap of fear. By your example, by living in love, By openly expressing this example, you will facilitate helping others to not live in fear, but rather to trust in love and one another. It is these difficulties that are necessary to catalyze the opening of the heart chakra, the effect being the expansion of humanity. Everyone who is here at this time is being given the opportunity to experience what some might call difficulties. But in hindsight, they will realize they were nothing short of self-desired, wonderful opportunities. Overcoming fear is the lesson, and similar to, referencing as discussed at length earlier in this session, and similar to observing signs, simply recognizing by opening oneself to seeing in the loving example of others that fear has no purpose and cannot be the answer. This will allow people in mass to move beyond fear and to embrace love. They will find comfort and support in one another, but this will not come easy. Those of you who are put in this realm at this time must recognize the importance of this role, for it is to be assumed without your assistance, fear will rule the day, i.e. people will be caught in the trap of fear and miss the opportunities being afforded.
Wow, Mary, that was beautiful. I think that's just a wonderful way to leave it today. Yeah, it's why we're here. And healers themselves, when, you know, reach out to another healer, reach out to somebody. You don't have to do it all by yourself. It's our connection with others that will help us get through these days. And
Absolutely.
hopefully we'll be telling some good stories real soon.
Absolutely.
Mary, thank you so much. Bless you for taking time out of your Sunday to be with us here today. And thank you all for joining us for another Worldwide Regression Week 2020. Unleash your mind, unleash it from some fear. All right. Till the next episode. Bye for now. Bye, everyone.
Bye.